remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. Also, comment down below any suggestions you may have. Welcome everyone to another episode of Fate Grand Order 7 War Room. This is Holy Grail and I'll be discussing how your favorite servants would handle an actual Holy Grail War. Because you never know, maybe one day you're walking down the street and BAM! Time to aura! Beowulf is a 4-star berserker servant that first appeared in the American Singularity as an enemy. There he was mentioned as being a hero equal to Arjuna. He's also appeared in the Russian Lost Belt, this time as an ally, and he helped facing Ivan. But how would Beowulf handle an actual Holy Grail War? Beowulf was summoned when he was in his youth. As such, his personality is not that of the wise king from the end of his legend, but instead of the reckless youth that would throw himself to danger just for fun. Beowulf is someone who desires destruction, and that would rather talk with his fists over his words. However, he is still capable of talking. In fact, he can have even quite complex conversations. It's just that when he encounters a strong person, he feels the need to fight them. That said, he does seem to be kind to weak people. He'll also be considerate to his master, either looking at them as equals or with a slight air of superiority. He has no desire for the Grail and will give it his all to win simply because of his master. Overall, don't be a jerk and Beowulf will be your guy. That seems like the default stance for servants, don't be a jerk, and yet somehow, there's always a jerk in every war. Beowulf's stats are pretty good. While his agility is quite lacking, his other stats are what one should want from a berserker. As for skills, he has 4 skills. Mad Enhancement, rank E-. Beowulf never lost his sanity once. Instead, he is summoned as a berserker because of his historical links to real berserkers. Kind of like how the assassin class is linked to the Assassins. As such, Beowulf doesn't actually lose his mind, nor does he get any benefits. Instead, he's just a bit more reckless than he would normally be. Berserk, rank A. It's a composite skill of valor and mad enhancement. Beowulf is immune to mental interferences. This means charms, confusion, and the like will not work on him. In addition, he receives a boost to his physical strength. Also, unlike many other servants, Beowulf doesn't fight like a human and instead fights more like a wild beast with his instincts. Which, speaking of instincts, Instinct rank B. Beowulf can instantly predict the best personal course of action during combat. This skill also has the benefit of allowing its owner to predict the trajectory of projectiles, making them suitable against ranged. Battle Continuation, rank B. Beowulf refuses to go down. Even when put in a dire situation, Beowulf should still be able to continue fighting until he beats his opponent. As for Noble Phantoms, he has 3 Noble Phantoms. Niengling. It's a magical sword Noble Phantom that looks and works closer to a hammer or a club. It is primarily used to smash enemies. Its only unique ability is that it can break after a lot of use, at which point the explosion from breaking can deal a lot of damage to Beowulf's enemies. Hurunding. It's a magical sword Noble Phantom that always performs the most optimal strike to inflict damage. It's a sword that can smell blood and will actively hunt it. Even in the hands of a wild beast, the sword will always do the most optimal attack. This, in the hands of berserkers with ridiculous strength, can result in repetitive, devastating blows. And finally, the last Noble Phantom, Grendel Buster. It's the crystallization of Beowulf's moment of frenzy when he punched and kicked Grendel until it died. It is a moment of true ferocity like no other, where Beowulf's very arms become the concept of primitive forms of weaponry. However, Beowulf can only use this noble phantom when both Niengling and Uhurunding are destroyed. And you heard me right, they need to be destroyed. Unlike how it's shown in his NP animation, Beowulf can't just throw them away to use it. Both need to be destroyed for him to be able to deploy this noble phantom. However, this is the true concept of a trump card, as losing both his weapon ends up powering him up instead of weakening him. While active, Beowulf receives a massive boost, becoming equal to the moment where he destroyed Grendel. Don't be surprised if he just outright rips his enemy's arm and starts smacking them with it. Also, this noble phantom nullifies unique noble phantoms and skills that allow others to perceive and understand his attacks. This means in essence that Beowulf's frenzy also becomes unpredictable and very difficult to block, parry, or even dodge. Overall, Beowulf is the definition of a true beatstick. High stats with powerful and useful skills, and noble phantoms that make his job easier as a beatstick. Superb beating stick. I've thrown the word beating stick a lot in my videos, however none fit that description as well as Beowulf. The concept of a beating stick is someone who wins by overwhelming others with pure stacks. While Beowulf doesn't have the most impressive servant stats I've covered, he does have the most impressive kit to support a beating stick. Battle continuation, instinct, and berserk are all exceptional skills that allow Beowulf to passively survive combat, while his noble phantom, Hurunding, allows him to constantly catch enemies off guard. Reckless. Beowulf is reckless to a fault and will almost always put himself in danger when given a mission. While he does have good skills for surviving those reckless moments, it's always good to have in mind that he'll go the extra mile and put himself in danger for every mission given to him. Trump card. There's no servant with a better trump card than Beowulf. Both his swords are known to break after some use, which means that as he loses his swords, his enemies will think that he's going to be weaker. However, the moment his two swords are gone, that's when Beowulf's true potential comes out, and any enemy unfortunate enough to be close by will suffer greatly at Beowulf's hands. Weak to weak people. It's an interesting weakness to have. While Beowulf will enter a frenzy-like state when against strong opponents, against weak enemies Beowulf might be prone to holding back or even refusing to attack them. Berserker that won't drain you. Beowulf might have a frenzy temper, but he is not truly insane. He won't simply drain you dry without sinking. Not only that, aside from his Grendel Buster, everything else he has are passive abilities and weapons that don't really use that much mana, meaning that the only moment where he'll actively need mana will be to use Grendel Buster. But even then, it shouldn't be anything serious and your life should be quite safe. Beowulf is a unique berserker in that he doesn't act like a berserker. While he'll have his moments of frenzy during combat, he's still quite well controllable. Not only that, his personality also makes it easy for most masters to manage him, so long as you're not a horrible person. This means that he's open to most strategies. However, you do have to keep in mind that if someone were to challenge him, let's say like Iskander did in Fate Zero, Beowulf would have a difficult time refusing the challenge. Regardless though, your strategy with Beowulf is simple. You need him to use both of his swords as much as possible while extracting the most value out of them, while also preparing him for any deciding fights where he'll need Grendel Buster. Remember, his swords aren't necessarily in the way. While not his best, they still offer quite a good amount of versatility. Hurunding in particular has a nasty ability in conjunction with his strengths, while his Niengling can make for a nasty surprise attack. However, ultimately, you'll want to reveal Grendel Buster against a strong enemy. The surprise of Beowulf getting a power up from losing his weapon should catch most enemies off guard. In the ideal situation, Beowulf would only use Grendel Buster in the last battle of the war. so your strategy should resolve around that. You want to establish Beowulf early on as a fighter with 2 swords. At first, he'll be considered a threat since Beowulf's name is quite famous. However, once he loses one of his swords, that should lower his level of danger considerably, making him less relevant to target. You can even use the Yngling as the sword that breaks first, as that way you can take out an enemy by surprise, eliminating the competition while at the same time reducing your level of threat. Urunding should be the last sword he keeps, since it's his best sword out of the 2. In the case that you're in a tight spot and need to use Grendel Buster, you can have Beowulf turn his noble phantoms into broken phantoms. This will increase their power, but also make them fragile and cause them to break, giving you a quick access to Grendel Buster. However, this should be used as a last resort, as it's best to just use his 2 swords for the majority of the war. Beowulf doesn't have too many bad matchups. His instincts will keep him well versed against skilled enemies that fight with unfair tricks. His battle continuation will keep him going against unfair abilities and noble phantoms, and his berserk will protect him from mind control and mental attacks from craftier enemies. His Urunding will keep most enemies second guessing, since the attack will always be the most optimal. This, however, can be a double-edged ability, as against enemies like Emiya, always going for the best strike means that Emiya can just block it endlessly. However, thanks to Beowulf's strength, even knowing where the attack is heading might not be enough to block it effectively. And finally, Grendel Buster should be the trump card that just demolishes most enemies he encounters. That said, despite all of this, Beowulf doesn't actually have any broken or ridiculous ability. It would be more accurate to say that Beowulf is simply extremely efficient at what he does, which is beating people. He has good skills and abilities, but they aren't unfair or broken. As such, I'll give him the rank A. Beowulf is an extremely strong competitor in any Holy Grail War, but he's not broken or unfair. Rather than winning through sheer stats advantage or through broken abilities, Beowulf is simply well versed. All of his skills and noble phantoms serve a function, and they are all well balanced. Perhaps the best way to describe him is that in the case of your average servant, they would normally have one of his skills and then a bunch of weaker skills. However, in the case of Beowulf, all of his skills are pretty good, and they all complement each other and his fighting style. His noble phantoms aren't amazing either, but they are also still dangerous and deadly if used correctly. He's also one of the easier berserkers to control, making him an optimal choice for a berserker. And that was Beowulf, an overall impressive servant. Thank you Blank for the suggestion. Your comment was a pretty good clickbait to get me to look at the servant, since I actually believed you that he had Grendel with him. But that's not the case. His noble phantom has Grendel in its name, but doesn't actually summon it. As for the next servant, it will be Kama, since her event is right around the corner. So, I hope all of you good luck on rolling for the sexy assassin, and until next time, bye.